Faraday presenta Ojos con Alergia y Picazón contra el Jardinero. Y el ganador es Faraday Extra Fuerte. Para aliviar la picazón de los ojos por alergia, actúa más rápido y supera a Claritin y Flonase aún a las 24 horas. Faraday, adelante.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Reclamation Podcast, where our goal is to help you reclaim good practices for life and leadership in Christ. I'm your host, Tony Meltenberger, and today on the podcast, director Andrew Hyatt. He is the director of the brand new movie, The Blind, now available at all theaters. The Blind is this incredible story of the Robertsons. You might know the Robertsons from Duck Dynasty, specifically the story of Phil and Kay. It's a story about addiction and redemption. And my conversation with Andrew, we talk about all of that. Plus, we talk about what it's like to lead a movement on a movie set. And so it's an incredible conversation. I think you're going to love his storytelling, his ability to think creatively. And one of my favorite things from the conversation, outwork everyone. So now, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Andrew Hyatt. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited today to have filmmaker and director, author Andrew Hyatt with us. Andrew, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate the time and excited to be here as well.
Well, man, one of the things that I love to start off with is kind of a macro view of someone's life. So how would you describe the calling that God has placed on your life?
A lot of running away. A lot of ignoring all the wonderful signs that God continued to bring into my life. So it was definitely probably a harder journey than it needed to be, just from a perspective of again, a little bit about my backstory. I grew up Colorado, and I never really understood that. I know this is going to sound very silly, but I never really understood that filmmaking, writing these things was a job. I never understood that, and you kind of wonder, well, where do you think all the movies came from? Where do you think the actors? Where do you think the writers? All these things. It just never crossed my mind growing up in a small town in Colorado. And so it wasn't until college that I kind of had this, it was actually my mother that said I was going to study business, and she said, you're really into the creative things. Maybe you should kind of pursue something that's a little bit more exciting for you. You only kind of get one shot at this. So I went into film school at Loyola Marymount, and I really just got deep, a deep dive into the Hollywood experience, and for about 10, 12 years, just doing the thing, living that lifestyle. And if I look back, to your question, if I look back, there were so many hallmarks of where God was trying to speak, trying to turn me into say, hey, I gave you some gifts and I want you to use them for me, and not for somebody else's glory. And so I think a lot of sort of the recap, if I were to do a quick recap, is it really took a knock on the back of the head for God to say, okay, wake up. I don't want you out there doing this for someone else. I want you out there doing it for me. But it took a good amount of time. And there were many times that I said, I was offered things or things crossed my path. And I was so adamant, I will never make a Christian film. I don't want to do it. No interest whatsoever. And then, here I am. What have I, 3 biblical movies and, two very faith-based, films later. And it's like, okay, God, whatever you want to do next, I'm in.
Because I'm really curious about how it must be in the world that you're in, right? Because you've become very accomplished. You've done lots of movies now. It feels like a lot of movies to me. I guess I don't really have anything to compare it to, but successful movies. And how is it showing up in the director space as now a known director and also being Christian? Is that ostracizing in that world? Is it welcoming? Is it kind of just everybody let live and everybody just kind of does what they want? Or what's that experience like for you?
That's a great question. I think it took me a long time to be kind of confident in that arena. with my faith and being okay to, maybe poorly choice words, but kind of have it exposed. I would say on the first couple of films, and certainly when I was, kind of struggling and really finding my faith again, I certainly wouldn't have wanted people to know that was going on kind of in the background. And so when I directed my first film, that would have been, 2013, 2014, I was still wrestling a little bit with my faith. I knew what God had called me to do. But I didn't, to your point, I didn't quite have the pieces of like, okay, what does that mean though? Like, do I need to be kind of this hidden, closet Christian that doesn't say anything and just kind of loves everybody and that kind of stuff? Or are you calling me to be more outspoken about this? So I think really it took me a few films to realize, like most of the world, people are lost and they're struggling in their own lives and they're broken and no matter how kind of how forward they are on their beliefs and their confidence in those or whatever, it's pretty quick, especially when you're making a film and you're around people 14, 16 hours a day. You really get to know people quickly. And it's pretty easy to start seeing, okay, everybody's struggling a bit, everybody, even if there's a bit of a stubbornness or an arrogance, everybody's still seeking truth and looking for something out there, right? Who am I? What's the purpose of me being here? There's a lot of that going on in any field, right? Not just film. I think in film, you maybe especially get, struggling people that tend to be more creative and kind of expressing themselves in a certain way, whether that's actors or writers. And so I think a lot of it was just kind of figuring out, how can I be vocal about this in a way that's, I never wanted people to feel like this is a Christian set. This is a, you can be part of us, but you're really kind of on the outs. And so we made there were a couple producers early on when I did a film called Full of Grace, which the next film after that was the Paul film with Jim Caviezel and James Faulkner. And we just made it really clear, you know what, we don't care where you're from, what your background is, whether you're Christian or not. We want you to come be a part of something that just blows you away, just from a sense of like family, community. Why are these people, why do they care about me? It's not just a job. Why are they checking in on me? Why am I having these deep conversations? And I think when I saw that really transformed the set, another part of that was we brought our families on set. So there wasn't this like summer camp feel, which film sets tend to be, kind of like, hey, we're all away from our families for 6 months. Let's go wild, and it was like, nope, we're going to change that too. I'm going to bring my kids on set. They're going to be around for lunch. And all of a sudden you can just see that kind of crusty exterior start to fall away pretty quick, where people just say, man, I don't know what's going on with these people, but it's very different. And it was never to like, okay, week 2, we're going to start preaching the gospel to people. It was just, no, let's start with just showing them something different. A lot of these people have been in the industry for 30, 40 years. And they'd come to us and say, oh, that was like, I've never had an experience like that. Like everybody was kind, and I never heard somebody screaming at somebody, so little things too, right? It's not sort of always big concepts. And so anyway, it started there. And then I think when we saw kind of the success of that, and then people wanting to, hey, we'd love to be on the next movie. We'd love to come back and be a part of this. I mean, it kind of gives you that confidence, right? That like, okay, yeah, I think everybody's looking for truth, and we just need to be there when the time's right and they want to talk about it. And we've got so many incredible stories of those moments, of people finally opening up and asking the questions. Okay, you got to tell me, like, why are you guys the way you are? What's going on? And you say, well, look, all we can point back to is Christ, and this is something that's important to us, and it influences everything we do and say and all these things. And so, sorry, long way around to answer your question, which is, it took a while to, I think, feel confident in that. And I imagine that's in any field of like, gosh, do I need to be preaching the gospel more to my coworkers? Do I need to be out there like on the street corner? And I've just found that it's about just letting people at first know they're welcome. You love them. Maybe you don't agree with their lifestyle. You don't agree with where they're at in life, but it's amazing how quickly they see something is different and they want to know is what I'll say. And maybe there's a few that have no interest whatsoever, but for the most part, I think people are searching. They're really searching.
It's fascinating. As you talked about this idea, you sounded just like a pastor to me, right? Like essentially, now you're not going to like this, right? Because nobody ever really wants that title, but you're pastoring this community of people towards a very intentional outcome, which is always the goal in pastoring a church. One of the things that I would be curious about is that as a director, I would imagine that you live in a very contentious world of trying to keep a harmonious, intentional culture on set while also meeting the needs of the people who are paying the bills, which is very similar to a church, actually. How do you live in the tension of protecting the culture and still getting the job done in a way that stewards the resources?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it comes down to being wise about who your partners are going to be from the offset. I try to choose my projects with exactly what you said in mind. Is this a producing team, a financing team that understands we're going to do things a little bit differently, or is this a team that is about the bottom line and is about like, we don't care how it gets done, get it done. So I think from the offset, there's definitely those question marks, because I think when you have that support from the top, it certainly allows you to be able to, kind of top-down leadership, right? Of being able to say, okay, they've got my back over here. And so now when I go to my production designer or my cinematographer and something's not right, something's not feeling right, again, it's not a demand of, hey, we're burning through money, we don't have time, what are you doing, what's your team doing? It just becomes more of a like, hey, like everybody's here to support. Everybody's here to help. How do we help? What's going on? Is it a bad combination of personalities that you need the producers to fix? Is it something that I can help with? But I think for my industry, which isn't the case for a lot, so I'm sure there's better answers to this out there. We spend so much time, in pre-production and prep, weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, sometimes months, that you get a pretty good sense before you land on set of kind of what the dynamics are going to be. Okay, I need to kind of keep an eye on this kind of over here, not in a micromanaging kind of way, but, I think you're just well aware of like, if there's going to be some issues, here's where it's going to come from. Sometimes that happens with talent, right? Sometimes the cast, you kind of are like, I've spent a couple weeks with this person and there's going to be some clashing of heads, and we're gonna get our way through it. So, but it's a balance, isn't it? I mean, everything in life is a balance. So, of course, we still have a clock ticking. We still have a budget that has to be hit. So, but I do find with the right amount of prep and the right amount of just, again, early on, if you can find that team where just everybody's on the same page, it just makes your life so much easier. And I'm not saying that's happened, 100% of the time, even 95% of the time. But when you kind of say, you know what, because a lot of the structure of a film is a lot like most companies, you have the director, but like each department is run by their own kind of head of department, your production design team, your camera team, your costume team, and on down the line. And so you're really trusting those heads of department, like you'd be trusting managers of different, elements to like, okay, this is your team. Like, I'm going to let you do your thing. And I hope I don't have to jump in. And it's amazing when you find just those people that are great at that. It just makes your life so much easier.
One of the things that we say around here a lot is that if you're not dedicated to your disciplines, you'll be destroyed by your distractions. And I can imagine that in the intensity of producing this massive creative output, that everything's coming at you. It's hard to stay disciplined. What are some of the things that you do on a daily basis to stay dialed in to both God and your family?
That's a great question. It started pretty early. Let me answer the family thing first, because that was sort of the first change that we made. We tried the first film I did to be a part as a family. And I think it was a small film, but it was still about, let's say, 6 weeks, I think was about the time. And it's just unhealthy, it really is just not, how God sort of has set this up, to be apart from our families. And there are obviously situations where that's impossible to change. People go away in the military, people go away for other things that it's just impossible to rectify. But for us, it was like, okay, we need to have a 2-week rule. That's our rule. We don't go apart as a family for more than 2 weeks. That's sort of the limit. I have 5 children now, and 2 weeks is sort of where they start hitting a wall of, their own disciplines, their own behaviors. Things just start to fall apart. It just starts to fall apart. So that was one of the first things we did, and then it kind of graduated into, I think we just need to be on set, because I think it's great for the kids to experience this, but it's also great for people to see that there's families here. Again, it's a very kind of rare, the director's got his family and they're all at lunch over here. Like, interesting. It just changes the dynamic. So that was kind of how the family thing, and then in the evenings, obviously during the week is a little tough. We're shooting 12, 14-hour days. I'll usually stay for an hour or two after to work on the next day's shoot with the cinematographer and production. It just ends up being all consuming. But we really try to carve out the weekends. We're not shooting on the weekends. So we say, okay, Daddy's not going to be around much, during the week, but on the weekends we try to hang out just as a family, take those as days off, true days off. So I think we found a better rhythm with the family thing. As far as the discipline of bringing God into this, that is so critical. Just as far as having, if you don't start your day, especially, but I'm going to say anything. I mean, especially when you're dealing with 300-400 crew members and actors, and you're trying to get shots and do all these things. I don't think I'd survive without sort of, finding that base at the beginning of the day. But I would say anything, right? If you don't start the day with God, it's just, I just don't know how you kind of find the right, balance to doing anything. So, but that's one thing we made. It actually took to the Paul film, and we just made a commitment. We said, look, we're gonna start the day off in prayer on the set that we're in. So whether that's, we're out in the middle of the wilderness, or we're in, Priscilla and Aquila's house, like, we're just gonna start the day like that. And whoever wants to join can join. It's not this is the director and the producers only, or the actors. It's just whoever wants to join can join. And that was just such a powerful, because I feel like you're not only kind of personally, in connecting with God for the day, but just that idea of praying over the set and over the crew and all that, inviting the Holy Spirit into that place and that day. I have to, it obviously made a huge difference, obviously. Now, could we have not done it and things worked out the same way? Maybe, but I don't know. There's just something, I'm sure you've had that experience before, where you just know, God's amongst us here. He's in the midst, and something special is happening, whether it's with a performance that everybody is just what is going on here? This is special. Or you just feel hey, there's also dangerous things on set. You've got electricians and construction, and it's praying protection over that. I don't need a guy falling off the ladder, an hour into the shoot, or lights coming down or something. So again, you just, okay, God, we trust you with this day. We trust you with this set. We trust you with, the message. It's not this is not us trying to just tell a story that we feel called to tell a story. So God, what do you want to tell? It's your story. So I think all these things kind of play into a piece, right? It's really a piece. Can I go into my day when the movie starts, when we start shooting, the clocks are, the camera's rolling, the clock's ticking. Do I have a peace and a joy about where I'm sitting, or am I just kind of anxious and stressed and, oh my goodness, I hope we get this. I hope this works out. Like, what a gift that you can just sit there and say, all right, God, like, this is in your hands. We'll do the work, but this is on you, I think that's a gift in anything.
I love that. And actually, I think that that's probably true for any profession, right? If you can get there early and really welcome God into the space, of course, God's already there, but, officially kind of give him that welcome, let him have the peace. I think it's a great start. I am curious. So, the Paul movie and now this Phil Robertson movie, The Blind, they're both stories about people's lives. And your job is the chief storyteller about the telling and kind of representing in a way this person's story. I have so many questions about the tension of that. What's it like to carry the burden of trying to represent someone's life? One, Paul, who was clearly a hero of the faith, and we have some scriptures, but we lose a lot in that. And two, Phil, who is kind of become this iconic figure and hero of the faith, who's alive, very much alive. What's that burden like for you? How do you live in the tension of it?
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
I mean, the real question is, who am I scared of more? Is it Paul or Phil? Because it's a toss-up. It's a toss-up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, dang, he's heavy hitters coming out of the gate.
Yeah. One I'll meet in heaven, and he could have some issues. The other's very much alive, it very different, but still, you're right. The burden of kind of, okay, I just want to represent these people well and tell the story well. On Paul, a little bit different, as you say, just from a sense of, we do have the scriptures, but there's a lot of fill in the blanks that, you can find in tradition. We had a lot of help from scholars and pastors and priests and bishops and all sorts of things to just help us kind of frame this in the right way. But the Paul story became a little bit more about, obviously we were like, okay, there's going to be things that we're going to know straight off the bat don't fit into the canon of Paul's story. You'd read a book, there's plenty of kind of, liberal opinions on Paul that you read and you say, this is just not adding up to me. And so, you start framing where it became more about, okay, well, what's the heart? We're going to have to add dialogue. We're going to have to add, maybe a Roman character here and there. But can we honestly go back and say, does this fit the heart of the scripture? Does this take away or does it fit? And as long as 100% of the time we can come back and say, nope, like this fits and here's why, we felt pretty confident in going forward with that. And obviously, everybody's got their opinions on that, but felt good. Phil's was interesting because it's really difficult to, especially a film like this that tends to dig into kind of a portion of someone's life that's a little bit grittier, a little bit more difficult in sort of airing some dirty laundry, if you will, as far as these were some tough moments. It was very difficult because he's right there and you're like, I mean, on one hand, it's great because I just say, hey, Phil, how did this really go down? Did it happen like this or did it happen like this? And he was a great resource for that. And so is Miss K, oh, actually, yeah, I know that one book said this, but actually what really happened, I remember this is it. So you're like, great, okay, we'll do that. But yeah, kind of capturing someone's life who is going to sit there and watch this taking place. And again, he's in such a wonderful place in his faith journey, right? Yeah. Where, you do wonder though, okay, we're digging up some old wounds. We're digging up some really tough stuff. Is that going to affect him? Is that going to, send him that. And thankfully, again, he's got such a steady ship, in his journey right now that it doesn't. But it is awkward, You're like, okay, here he is, and we're shooting the scene, where this is happening, and it's tough stuff. You do wonder, but I think he's so experienced now in being able to share his story, and his heart is so in the right place of like, I want this to show people that are struggling, that feel like there's no way God could ever forgive me. There's no way God could ever redeem something this bad. His heart will show them my story so that they know, like, nobody's too far gone. There's no way, you think you're bad. Look at what I did. So I think when you kind of have that attitude, I mean, obviously I don't have experience telling a story of someone who's not kind of faith-centric, faith-centered in that way. I can't imagine, digging into old wounds and they have no kind of centering force saying, yep, like this is good for people. So my experience was probably a little different than what could potentially have happened. But I will say, just, the support of people that believe in the truth and the beauty of what you're trying to communicate. That's a game changer. So obviously we can't speak to Paul. He wasn't here to help us. But again, through the scripture, you kind of get that same thing of like, okay, I feel pretty confident from these verses, Paul would love, this adaptation or this version of himself.
Hey guys, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Caleb Stanton, and I have had the incredible opportunity of editing this podcast for Tony for the last few years. I just wanted to take a moment and let you know that aside from editing podcasts, I am also a worship leader, songwriter, and Christian artist. And over the past 3 years, I have been working on crafting, writing, and recording my second full-length album. I am happy to say that it is finally releasing on September 29th, and I just wanted to give you a small taste of it right now. If what you heard interests you and you love Christian music, I hope you'll check out my album titled The Good Life when it releases on September 29th. Until then, you can follow me at Caleb Stanton Music on all my socials. You can listen to my previous music on Spotify or any other streaming service that you use. And you can even pre-order a CD if you're into that kind of thing on my website, which is calebstantonmusic.com/store. Now, let's get back to our conversation with Andrew.
For you, what was it like to get to know Phil? Like, I'm curious how God showed up in your life through him. He's seems to me, and again, I only know him through the shows, and then I watched the movie The Blind already. I watched it yesterday, and so diving into his deeper story a little bit that way. Like, I'm kind of curious as you walk away from this whole experience, how has the Robertson family left their kind of fingerprint on you?
What's amazing to me is you just, and it's probably different walks of life, having been in the Hollywood thing for over 15 years around very different personalities, some great, by the way. I'm not saying all of Hollywood is evil and bad, but I don't know that I could point to someone in my life that just absolutely without a doubt knows who they are, like no questions of identity, no questions about faith, like so just grounded in it, like Phil and the whole family really. But Phil, just that attitude of like, he truly does not care what you think about him. I mean, not even in like I just put that forward, but I really go home at night and I worry what people think, right? I have just not found anybody in my own walk of life that is grounded as Phil is just who he knows who he is. His identity is set on Christ. There is nothing else going on. And again, it's not even in Phil goes home at night and he really struggles with the way people think about him or judge him or this. I mean, no, this guy says what he knows needs to be said. He says what's on his heart. His total focus is on God. And I just think I just couldn't tell you where I've ever come across someone so authentic. And that's why I'd say it's an authentic. It's not like a personality he's developed and figured out over the years, or like, because sometimes you get that, right? Yeah. People are really good getting up in front of a crowd and sharing their stories, and they're likable and it's amazing, but they really struggle behind the scenes. And that's human, by the way. That's all of us. But it was great, Phil in this kind of twilight of his life. He's getting older. And it's just cool to sit down with someone that just has no doubts anymore. Here's the world. Here's what's important. It's family. It's God. And just like, that's it. And you're like, yeah, but what about this? What about, nope. It doesn't matter. And, so it's helped me again. It kind of goes back to your first question of like, I could be better at that of like, do I need to be broken up when I know somebody doesn't like me because of my faith, or someone doesn't like me because I had a hard conversation with them about something, or can I just always keep focused on Christ? That's Paul's, right? It's just like, can I just keep my eyes focused and say, nope, the only opinion that matters is yours, God. And that's how I have to live daily. And again, I don't think we don't have to get out there and start, hammering people over the head with a Bible and screaming at them and shouting at them. It's just like, no, like, do I trust the Holy Spirit to come when I'm writing a story, when I'm telling a story, when I'm talking to somebody, when I disagree with someone? And then can I walk away from that saying, all right, God, yeah, I did everything that you asked, and that's enough. And I don't need anything more. I don't need the world telling me it's great or not great. It's just, and so anyway, I think that's what impressed me most about this family is they just have such a solid focus on that concept.
There are two scenes in the movie that I want to ask you about. One's kind of funny. The other one's kind of serious. And I'm going to try to do it in the best way without giving away any spoilers or anything else. So I'm just going to ask the first one like this. This is the goofy one. Did Terry Bradshaw get to see where he was in the movie?
I don't know that Terry has seen it yet, but I know that everything is true. So I'm hoping he has a good laugh about it.
It was such a great scene. I was not ready for it, given the tenor of the film it kind of weaves in and out of darker moments and lighter moments, and I was just not ready for what was happening there. And so that was a really that was just a really enjoyable scene for me. I wanted to ask if you had to get his permission before you did it. I mean, I figured it was true given their relationship, but super fascinating storytelling on your part there.
Yeah, nice. I love it. I love it. Yeah, and needed, right? I mean, that was one of the things we're like, we need a little bit of comedy in this. This cannot be, 90 minutes of in a dark place. Like we got to bring. We got to bring some laughs.
Phil's a pretty funny
joy.
guy. Like I think Phil and Cy are both are very funny, and they both do a great. I think you do a great job with both characters matching what my experience had been to them. So they felt familiar to me from Duck Dynasty in the movie, but in a younger version, and that was the part that I was really surprised by. I see what you did there with the teacup. I see what you did there with using the word, hey there, Jack. I see what you did there. Right. It was, which is super fascinating to me just as someone who oftentimes tells stories that how do you honor the story and move forward. So kudos to you and your team for that. And the second question is at the very end, almost, it was before the credits, but it's today's version of Phil in the chair at the end of the movie where he shares what he shares. And I'll let people watch the movie to hear what he shares there. But I am really curious about what the room felt like in that moment, because I'll tell you that it felt real. Just palpable in my house when I watched it.
Well, yeah. Well, I first of all, I appreciate hearing that. That's great because, you always get a little nervous with sort of a gospel presentation, especially in film because, it just can go it can be so cheesy, right? It can be that altar call in the third act that just feels like, oh man, we spent the whole movie I think it's imbued with the Holy Spirit. We don't need to knock it out of the park now. It's there. Like, let's trust the audience. But we just felt like with this one, Phil has so many great moments like that in real life where you'll watch a video of him, you'll watch these things where he he just starts talking, and it must just be that Southern authenticity or something's going on where you just don't feel like there's just not a moment of BS in his body, right? Where you're just like, okay, yeah. Kind of. And I was just so proud of the actor, Aaron Von Andrian, who, was given this task of like, hey, like, and we had multiple versions. We had a longer version. We had a shorter version. We had so many different ways of kind of how do we attack this? Because this particular film did feel like it needed that closure, with kind of the whole setup of like, okay, this is about getting us to this point of like, okay, what's the point of all this? What's the purpose? And I just thought he delivered it in such a way, we talked earlier about like, oh man, you just pray. Can the Holy Spirit show up so that it just, this actor just doesn't overthink and it just goes with whatever, and you just know, I've done it enough where you just know when it's happening, and it's really special because you'll be behind the camera, and you'll have your headphones on. And you'll just notice, to your point, everything goes quiet. Everybody stops moving, shifting, fidgeting in their chairs. Even the producers, who are impossible to get to like focus and sit down and stop moving. Even there, headphones on, and you're just like, okay, this is if this is affecting everyone here, imagine when we color it and sound design it and do this, how it's going to affect the audience out there. So I was just really happy that we could do something like that, because I think it's necessary. But it really, I'm glad to hear that it's authentic, and it really came across like this guy's really sharing what happened to him, and it's beautiful. So that's great.
So how far? So you and I are talking in the beginning of August, and by the time this releases, it'll be closer to the release date of the movie. But how long ago did you wrap up shooting on this thing?
Oh my goodness. We would have finished shooting about a year ago, last spring. So what would that be? About 15 months ago?
Yeah. So like this process is so long, and I never understood this until I started interviewing directors and people who are in the film industry. Like it's, like book processes are long, but this is even longer than that. How does it feel to you as it now begins to work its way into the wilderness? Is it like, oh yeah, I forgot about that? Or is it like, oh man, I hope this didn't, shift or whatever. Like, what's that feeling for you watching this story that you stewarded and crafted and curated to kind of come together and now dump out into the world?
Yeah. It's a long process. There's so many elements to it though, which is helpful, that I feel like at each stage you almost are re-experiencing it, so you go from, okay, in the editing process, right? It's like, okay, that takes forever, but then by the end you're like, okay, this feels good. We got there. We got to the place that we needed to get to. But then you start, and it's like, okay, now we're going to work with the composer, and we're going to get into the music of it all and all that. And then it's like, again, you're re-experiencing it all. And so it gets fresh again. And then when you get to sound design, which is a whole other, amazing skill people have to just go in and start creating the world again, because very rarely can you use, a lot of on-set stuff. So all of a sudden you're creating, the atmosphere again. And so that kind of makes it fresh. But, as a director, the moment when you start seeing other people watch it and experience it, sitting in a room, even if it's a small room with, like a test audience or something, and you watch them kind of go through the emotions and, so to your question, I'm probably a little disconnected from it now. But then when you watch, like, okay, yeah, like I remember being moved by this when I first experienced it. And then you see kind of that translate. It's like, okay, great. But it's an incredible thing. But I think this one to me is just so exciting because the Duck Dynasty fan base, they're absolutely loyal. They love this family. It's a massive audience. But I think we really, as I always try to strive for, I don't really believe you can make a great story without infusing the Christian principles into it. I don't know how you do it. I mean, unless you're going to make a narcissistic, really dark film that's about no hope and all that. Maybe there's great films like that out there. But as far as like, we just seem to be at such a moment in time that I'll be really curious how just a general audience engages with this film, interacts with this film. Because again, it's like, we've come through some really tough times. Everybody has, from COVID to, the economy to tough politics. There's a lot going on in the world, war and it's like, I'll be very curious how an audience watches a film now that does bring some sort of joy and hope and has a points to something, right? It doesn't just say the world is dark and hopeless and, oh my goodness, what are we all going to do? We're all going to die. But these movies that are popping up and doing really well that kind of point to something deeper and saying, this is the human experience, but it's not all lost. We can point you to something. We actually have an answer. I'm excited for this film to get out because, and I don't know if you felt the same way, but I think it's gritty enough to attract. It doesn't feel like a faith movie necessarily. It's gritty. It's almost real.
Sneaky Jesus.
Yeah, sneaky Jesus.
Almost sneaky Jesus, right?
Jesus.
It's almost sneaky Jesus until it's not.
Until it's not, right? But we don't try to ignore, the alcoholism that Phil went through, the difficult times. And I think that's really going to be healthy for people now. I think people want to see, like, I'm really struggling. Is anybody else out there feeling the same way? And I think everybody's starting to say, yeah, I feel the same way. I'm struggling too. But what do we do? And then I think this is the beauty of the moment where we can come through and we can say, actually, here's the crazy thing. We have an answer for you. I know it's going to sound nuts, but we actually have an answer to all of this, to this. So, I think this one of a lot of the films I've made has this sort of ongoing excitement because of that, because I'm just really excited for audiences to see it.
It's incredible. I strongly recommend people go check it out. I have two more questions for you. One kind of joking, one kind of serious. Before I ask them, though, I know that my audience is going to want to connect with you all over the interwebs. Where's the best place to learn about what you're working on, learn more about the movie, kind of where are the go-to places for all that kind of jazz?
Yeah, I don't really keep much of a social media presence. I probably need to get better at it. But if you go to my Instagram, it's just my full name, Andrew Hyatt 07. And I tend to post stuff on there from the films and little hints of what I'm working on. So yeah, if you're curious, that's probably the best spot.
And then the best place to learn about where the movie's going to be shown?
theblindmovie.com. Yes, please go check it out. It's got all sorts of information. Sign up for email updates, but it's also got, how to bring it to your church, how to bring it to a group, pre-sale tickets. We'll be in over 2,000 theaters that weekend, September 28th. So any support us the way you're supporting Sound of Freedom, and let's keep it going.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, last two questions. The first one I'm going to ask is completely random.
Great.
I'm dying to know what your favorite film is.
Oh, God. Okay, this is tough. This is tough because it changes all the time. I love, films that dive deeper into humanity. I can't get enough of. So I'm a big fan of Andrei Tarkovsky. I know that's getting a little deep into the film archives. Russian director through the 60s and 70s. I love his work. But one that I'll tell you what, one, if it's on TV, that I'll always just be like, well, this is what I'm watching now. I love Children of Men. I don't know if you've seen Children of Men. Alfonso Cuarón.
Not. I'm going to make a note.
I thought
for sure you were going to say Shawshank. Shawshank always gets me.
A phenomenal film. Sure. Frank Darabont, what a writer-director, incredible. But Children of Men, and maybe I'm working on a sci-fi project now, so maybe I'm kind of in that headspace. But it's just a fantastic sort of, I would say, one of the most understated pro-life films ever made. It's basically, I'll give you the quick premise. It's a dystopian future where humans can't procreate anymore. There's no more babies. They can't have babies. Something happened in the, they don't really get into it. You don't really need to know why, but, and it's just changed the entire landscape of the world. You know, you talk about no joy, just sort of a dark, heavy, what's the purpose of life? But then he just threads this unbelievable Christian kind of theological message. Reminds me very much of like Chesterton or C.S. Lewis, like much more kind of, you know, tailored to a sci-fi kind of, let me tell a story about what you don't think I'm telling you a story about, right? Which I love.
That's incredible. Yeah, me too. It's good. Okay, last question I love to ask people. It's an advice question. I'm going to ask you to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, except I get to name the season of life that you're in, right? And I want to take you to the day before your very first day as a director of a film, all right? And if you could go back in time and sit down with that younger version of yourself and sit knee to knee and hold his hands and look him in the eyes, right? Like get really heart to heart with your old self.
Yeah.
You're getting ready to embark on this incredible film career. What's the one thing you're going to tell him?
Okay, I've got, because I've got a spiritual one and I've got more of a kind of work ethic.
Let's do both. They're my rules. We can break them.
Okay. So the work ethic, you know, I'd say, look, outwork everybody. Prep more than everybody, because there's going to come a time where your talent, you know, people are going to be more talented than you. You know, whether that's sports or life or, you know, it doesn't matter what the field is, but there's going to be people more talented than you. But if you outwork them, if you outprep them, if you out-research, if you put in the time, I guess is what I'm saying. If you put in the time, there's no competition for that. You know, it doesn't matter, because the opposite's true, right? It doesn't matter how talented you are. If you don't put in the time and you don't put in that effort, you're going to waste your talent. It's just naturally going to happen. You may get to a certain level, but you're never going to make it all the way. And so I think that would probably be what I'd say, because over the years, I think that has been sort of the one go-to of when I don't feel confident, when I get a little anxious, when I'm a little nervous, you know, can I pull this off? Like, this is a lot bigger than the last movie, or whatever doubts start to creep in my head. It's like, it's that calmness of, you know what? No, I put in the work. I put in the time. I put in the work. Now let me just enjoy this. Now I should be having fun. You know, if I'm playing in the Super Bowl and I've put in the time and the training and everything, then I should step on that field and have a blast and enjoy myself. Because I may not do it ever again. So that's that side. The spiritual side is just trust that God's put you exactly where you need to be today. And it may not be where you think you were supposed to be. It may not be where you want to be. But if you can just start leaning in and trusting you are exactly where you're supposed to be right at this moment. Again, I just think that it's hard from that perspective, to get into your head and start to get all those doubts and fears and, oh my goodness, like I'm not doing enough in life. Where am I doing? Where am I going? But it just gives you that peace to sit back and say, okay, God, like I'm here. I want to work for you. I'm ready to go. But if this is where you have me today, great. I'm in. I
love it. Andrew, thank you so much for your generosity today, of your time, your talent, and all that you're doing to build the kingdom of God through film. As someone who loves a good film, I deeply, deeply appreciate your work.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you, and thank you again for having me.
I told you guys what a great conversation with Andrew. I love the way he talked about his 2-week rule with his family, his work ethic. I think he also did it such a good job of talking about what it means to trust God's timing. He's one of those guys who I just appreciate, and the creative effort that it goes into creating a movie that never, ever gets old. So guys, super thankful for each and every one of you. As always, the highest compliment you can give us is sharing this episode with a friend. Maybe somebody who you know will go out and see the movie, or just appreciate what it means to be in that creative space. Guys, I'm thankful for you, for the opportunity to share this platform with you. And remember, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.